All right, we are live, and I'm really happy. We're going to be doing some question and answer today. The question and answer, you can go ahead and put those questions and answers in the chat, both here on Instagram, or both on TikTok and on YouTube. So go ahead, and as you are, dialing in, post put your questions in the chat, and I will get to them, as many of them as we can before our time is out. And while we are getting people in here, I'll tell you a little bit about the King James Version. But if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'm going to be paying attention to that, answering as many of those questions as I can. The King James Version is interesting because a lot of times people think that the King James Version is more accurate because it's older. It's an older translation, but it's actually not. The fact that it's older is part of the problem because archaeology, since the King James Version was translated, we've discovered a lot more copies of the Bible, a lot more fragments and books of the Bible that are older than the copies that the King James Version was based on. And so you'll actually find you'll find in the Bible passages that are just not in there anymore. And that's because what happens is you've got the oldest versions that we've got, a little bit younger. You sort of, if you can put them on a timeline, right? Oldest to youngest. And you'll see, like, oh wow, right here we've got this old version, and then somewhere right around here, this verse or passage is added. It's not beforehand, right? It's not in these earlier ones, but it's in everything afterwards. And you say, oh, well, when that happens, we know that, like, this was added here. It's not original to the text. And so they will, depending on how clear it is, they'll just straight out take things out, right? There's passages in Matthew and Acts where, like, you go and you're in there, you're looking at a verse, and it's like a chapter is like chapter 1, verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, verse 5, verse 7, and you're like, wait a second, where's verse 6? Well, that verse was just not. They're so confident it wasn't in the original version that it's just not there anymore. But it is in the King James Version, because what happens is, like, right here we got. We got. I see a question. I'm going to answer this question in just a second. We got. It was added right here, but everything before that is not in there. Everything after that it is. The problem is King James only had this part, right? It only had the newer part, and so, like, an easy place to find that is go to the end of the book of Mark. The whole section about, like, holding snakes and drinking poison, that's not original to the text. So it'll either be bracketed or grayed out or an asterisk that says, hey, this isn't in the original text. So I've got, somebody says, let's see, a right woman, I think. You ask, okay, how are we feeling about tattoos? Well, I am biased. I have tattoos, but the question about tattoos often comes from the book of Leviticus. So it's in Leviticus 19. It says, do not, 19:28, it says, you should not mark your bodies for the dead. And this is an interesting passage because when it talks about not marking your body for the dead, like to not tattoo your body, it's not just talking about tattoos, right? This is written in a specific culture, at a specific place, at a specific time, and one of the things that people did to worship in other religions at that time was to tattoo themselves. And that was a way that they engaged in worship for another religion. And so it says, don't tattoo yourself, don't mark your bodies for the dead. This was this worship practice in other religions. And it's saying, like, don't worship other gods. Don't do other religious practices. Do the religious practice of this religion. And in that, it also talks about not cutting the corners of your hair. That, again, was another thing that a religion at the time did. They sort of shaped their hair like planets. Yeah, so that verse is not about tattoo in its modern form. It was about a worship practice for another religion. So it just doesn't apply in that way. If you want to get to that meaning, it would be like, hey, um, stick with the practices that work for you, that are in your stream of religious practice. Don't just go out and find something else. Um, Work on the stuff that works for you. Yeah. So here we go. Let's talk a little bit more about. Okay, Phil Red, what do you think about the methodology of the way the King James Version was translated in small groups? I'm not exactly sure what you're saying in small groups. There's a lot of problems with the way the King James Version was translated. That King James actually gave some translation values, like he wanted it to use the same terminology as the Anglican Church. He wanted it to be more pro-monarchy. That was problematic. They actually, in a lot of places, used the syntax of the biblical language, the Hebrew or the Greek, and mapped the English words onto it. I can give you an example from like Spanish. And the order of the words in Spanish are different than the order of the words in English. So like in English, I'd say, this is my house. And in Spanish, you would say, this is the house of me. Yeah, so this is the house of me. So the me, that word comes at the end in Spanish and at the beginning in English. Though you can say, this is the house of me in English. This doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can understand it, but it's not the way that it is actually spoken. And so instead of saying, this is the house of me, the accurate translation of that would be, this is my house. It's a very different order, less words, all of that, but it is a more accurate translation. So what happens in the King James Version, in a lot of the King James versions, they take the syntax of the ancient languages, they put the English words on it, which made it very, very difficult to understand. It's funny too, because that's the complaint about for a lot of people about reading King James in the modern time, is that it's hard to understand. But people will say, oh yeah, but that's just how they talked back then. Well, that's actually not. No one has ever talked the way the King James Version is written. In fact, when it came out, that was the complaint. That was a primary complaint when the King James people said, well, it's hard to understand. People don't talk like this. It actually wasn't a popular translation until King James banned the Bishop's Bible, which was the most popular translation and a huge source for the King James Version. Once that one was banned, then the King James Version rose in popularity. If I didn't answer your question, Phil, go ahead and put that back in there. Okay, so you said. Oh, just real quick, Princess, you said, do I have recommendations for the best translation? I absolutely do. So biblical scholars are in consensus that the most accurate modern translation into English on the market is the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, the NRSVUE. The New Revised Standard Updated Edition. You can buy that on Amazon or anywhere. Actually, in my profile, there's a link to an Amazon list. It's got a lot of books that I recommend, including the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. So you can actually just click it right away. But yeah, that's good. I also like the CEB. It's the Common English Bible. It's a modern translation. It is just a little bit easier to read, I feel like, sometimes, than the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, though the NRSVUE is much more accurate. Okay, so I just started to read your question, Aright. If I am a spirit and this body is not forever, it shouldn't matter. So I was always confused. Oh, wait, this has to do with your previous question. Oh, yeah, and you're talking about, yeah, we were talking about tattoos, right? Of course, tattoos are in no way a thing that affects anything about you spiritually. And that verse doesn't have to do with that at all. Okay. Any thoughts or research on the Septuagint? Yeah, I'd love if you ask a more accurate, or not more accurate. Um, if you ask a little bit more detailed question, I'd love to give you a little bit more detail about the Septuagint. So go ahead and throw that in there. We're also live on YouTube. If you've got a question, just put it in the chat. I'm answering as many questions as I can here, both on TikTok and on YouTube. So the princess, is it a good translation for best understanding non-scholars? So the Septuagint. So the Septuagint is interesting because Septuagint is actually a Greek translation, and it is really an important translation. It's a translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Koine Greek. So Koine Greek is the Greek of the New Testament, and that began like the 3rd century BCE. And so this is really old. It's a really old translation, but it is in Greek. And so when you ask about whether or not it's a good translation for non-scholars, I would say if you can read Koine Greek, it's a great translation for you to look at. But if you are reading something that says it is the Septuagint that is not Greek, then you're just reading another English translation, and it's not. I'd have to know exactly what it is to give you a recommendation on that. If you've got questions, though, go ahead and put those questions in the chat. I'm answering as many as I can, both here or both on TikTok and on YouTube. So go ahead and throw those questions in the chat. We've already talked about tattoos and the fact that the verse in Leviticus is not prohibiting people from the modern practice of tattoo, which is good because I have some. And we've talked a little bit about translations, about King James Version. We started out there. We've come back to it again. We've talked about the Septuagint yeah, so go ahead and if you have a question, post those questions in the chat. So do I think, this is Princess, do you think God is depicted as homophobic and misogynistic in the Torah / Old Testament? I'll take the second one first. Is God misogynistic in the Old Testament? Yes, God is depicted in the Old Testament as misogynistic sometimes, and in other times very pro-woman, which the misogyny is to be expected because it's a very patriarchal culture in the Old Testament, and so you expect to see a God depicted in that way. What is interesting is that there are a lot of places where God is not patriarchal, is not misogynistic, and those really stand out in a way, in this sort of stark contrast that I would say indicate that there are forces that are pushing back against the culture, and that's important. The other thing that you asked was, is God is God homophobic? That's a problematic question because the modern concept of homosexuality doesn't exist in that ancient culture. So in that culture, um, intimacy, physical intimacy, was something that an active, Dan McClellan says, an active agent did to um, a passive object. And so there was not mutuality. There's not all of the things that we think of when we think of homosexuality and the way that we deal with physical intimacy today. Um, and so so you can't map that concept from one to the other. That's like sort of one of the fundamental problems with saying that the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin, because the concept of the culture, the way the culture understood physical intimacy was like 180 degrees from now, and to move those from one to the other is problematic. So I don't know that the Bible depicts God as homophobic or not, because the idea of homosexuality is the concept is very tied to this modern idea, and you can't actually find that concept in the Bible. All right, Cheshire. Let's see if I can see the rest of your name. Sure, Cheshire Mommy. You're an enigma to me. I don't get you. You're a pastor, but you're skeptical. I love this. Yes, absolutely. I am a deep skeptic, also a pastor. Being skeptical is for me is like a personality trait. I don't accept stuff just because some random person says it. I'm always looking for data, and I'm looking for reliable data that is from experts, and I'm looking for experts to give me the sort of expert or academic consensus around what that data implies. And so this is important. When you're looking, so if I was trying to understand if there was ever a global flood, I would go to geologists, and they would use the tools of geology to investigate that question, and they would bring the data back. And just to be clear, no, there was never a global flood. Geologists there is consensus around that, right? If I was trying to understand if the Earth or the universe was created in 7 days and just a handful of thousands of years old, I wouldn't go to geologists necessarily. I would for the universe, I would go to cosmologists, and they would use the tools of cosmology to get reliable data, and would come back with the fact that the universe is like 13 and change billion years old. So if you're looking for religion, or if you're looking for spirituality, you don't use the tools of biology or cosmology to give you reliable data. You're going to use the tools of that field to collect the data, and then experts in that field to help you understand that data and talk about the implications of it. Now, do people who are experts in religion misuse data and say things wrong, or use it to manipulate people? Absolutely. That doesn't mean that the data is wrong. It means that you have an unethical practitioner, right? And so, yeah, when it comes to religion and spirituality, I'm looking for data. And, if it's like an ancient spiritual text like the Bible, I'm going to look for biblical scholars. I'm going to look for the data that they offer from their tools, and then the consensus that they offer to understand those texts. So that's how you can be a deep skeptic, and also a pastor. It also means that I'm always holding all of my beliefs with an open hand, because I might be wrong about any or all of them. I don't know which ones, but I can very easily come upon new data that invalidates some idea or belief. And then there's a lot of things that I just don't know. I've heard the data and there's not consensus, or it doesn't really resonate with me. And so I just have a question mark around things. Yeah, I hope that helps me be. Actually, I would love for it to make me more of an enigma, but but it helps you understand being a skeptic and a pastor. As a pastor, I also, just to say, as a pastor, my role in the world is to help people find spiritual beliefs and practices that work for them. And by that, I mean beliefs that help them become the best version of themselves, find a purpose greater than themselves, and experience transcendence, right? That's my role as a pastor. And we actually have this fun community called Not Church. Not church. So somebody described it as that it's the name stuck because it's like church, in that all the people there are spiritually interested, engaged, want to talk about religion and spirituality and spiritual practices and spiritual experiences. They identify as all kinds of different streams of religion and non-religion. So it's full of those kind of people who are having those conversations, but nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you don't believe the right thing. I love it. It's great. Um, we charge $3 a month for that spiritual community because we're not going to ask you to give a percentage of your income. We all have plenty of religious trauma. That's another thing that we do. We process our religious trauma there. Yeah, I think you'd love it. There's a link in the profile, but you should definitely check it out. And it's $3 a month. And if it doesn't work for you, just stop paying. It's fine. And if you end up showing up in there and being judgy, I'm gonna bounce you and not feel bad about it. But we have never had to do that, and we've got hundreds of people. So yeah, I think you'd love it. Oh well, we've got a lot of people, a lot of questions here. I've been doing TikTok, just check in on YouTube. So we're gonna go C Grub. Do you believe in possessions? Like, I'm assuming you're meaning demon possessions. I'm I'm not sure what I believe on that. Yeah, I I can say that I read a book about uh, some research, some study, and some sort of stories about um, the Vatican's exorcists, and I know that they require a psychological evaluation, and the psychological evaluation has to show that the person doesn't have any other explanations for what's going on with them before they have an exorcism. They've actually, some people will do it without it, will break the rule, but there's actually not been an exorcism done. Basically, there's not been somebody who is evaluated by a psychological professional and then uh, it and not had a diagnosis, right? And be able to be treated that way. But as far as like, is it real? Like, I don't know. I think sometimes that there are different ways that people describe the same experience, and maybe that's what that is. But I guess I've got lots of words because I always have lots of words. But the bottom line is, I don't know what I believe about that. Okay, Cynthia Knight, I think. Who tempted Jesus in the wilderness if it wasn't Satan? I'm a little confused by a video of mine. Okay, yeah, you know what? That's good because we talked about the word Satan. So let me just, I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Okay, so the problem is that in the Bible, the idea of Satan that we have now is mostly based on a book of fiction called Dante's Inferno. In the Bible, we don't have a single entity that is described in the way that modern people think about Satan. In the Old Testament, there is this, the word is Satan or Ha-Satan, and that word described a role of an accuser in the divine council. So there's like lots of gods. The God of the Old Testament is the head of all the gods. And when they're having a moment where they're discussing stuff, there's an accuser, and that person is like the prosecuting attorney, right? That person has this role of the Satan. And there is even an angel of the Lord in the Bible that's talked about as fulfilling that role. So it's not some evil being. And when you're talking about this verse in Matthew chapter 4, where Jesus is being tempted in the wilderness, it's using the Greek ho diablos. And again, that means slanderer or accuser. It is the Greek equivalent of that role, the Satan, from the Hebrew Bible. So yeah, it's not. I feel like I haven't fully answered your question. If you've got a follow up, go ahead and put that follow up in, and I'll try to get to that a little bit further down. But yeah, I think really in that passage, it's this idea of an accuser, and it's sort of borrowing this imagery from the Old Testament of the divine council and somebody playing this role of accusing of like saying this person is bad, trying to get them, in the book of Job, right? There's that person, that role being played in the divine council in Job, where the person's saying, Job's only faithful because you haven't tested him enough. Yeah. Again, if you've got a follow-up, please go ahead and post that in the chat. Okay. Would you say you're an agnostic Christian? Josh, that is a really great question. I like the juxtaposition of those two terms. I don't think I'd say that though. What I like to say is I'm a practitioner of Christianity, right? This is the stream of religion that I've been trained in. I spent a lot of time and money being trained in it. I sort of a subject area expert in that. And that is sort of the beginning point for the way that I engage with God. So I don't say that I'd be an agnostic Christian, but I really love that. Robbie Rob, oh yeah, you're talking about our Not Church community. It's a great community. It is. It's good to see you, Robbie Rob. Christina Johnson, what do I believe about speaking in tongues? That is another great question. Okay, so we have just really the problem with speaking in tongues. When we talk about the Bible, is there's only a handful of verses that are said to be talking about that. And those handful of verses are not clear. Like the filling of the Holy Spirit in Acts chapter 2, it says that they spoke in tongues, but the tongues were actual languages. And the way is it lists people from all different parts of the world. Then it says that they spoke in tongues. Then it says that all of those people from all of the different parts of the world were hearing what was being said in their own language. So the tongues that they were speaking in were specific languages, like known languages. And in the Pentecostal, streams, the more charismatic streams, the speaking in tongues that's done there. There are these moments where it talks about a heavenly language and that kind of stuff. This idea of speaking in a jargon sort of extemporaneously, that is not uncommon in other religions, that practice of getting into this ecstatic state. And so as far as like what I personally believe about speaking in tongues, I generally don't, I try not to share my absolute personal beliefs. I try to give you data and what I've seen so that you can judge that for yourself. And so I would say that there are similar things that happen in other religious streams. It's not uncommon, an uncommon practice. It can seem very strange if you didn't grow up in it, but there are a lot of people that is part of how they get into this ecstatic state, and where they can experience this sense of transcendence, the sense that they are connecting with God, to rise above the circumstances of their life and the difficult things that are going on. And listen, if speaking in tongues helps you get through life, man, I just go for it. It's fine. I don't think it's hurting anybody. What hurts people is when people are shamed when they don't speak in tongues, when they are forced to speak in tongues, and they feel like they have to make that up in order to be seen as actually a Christian. That hurts people. But if you want to go and speak in tongues, and that helps you feel like you're connecting with God, go speak in tongues. Do whatever it is, as long as it's not hurting anybody else. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you have questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. I'm answering as many questions as I can. Josh, yeah. I wonder if there's a psychosomatic reason for it. Yeah, there is this. No, and this is this idea of this ecstatic state. Josh, you can look in a little bit more into that, that might. I think that might be a fruitful path for you to follow. Okay, so we're answering questions. Go ahead and put those in the chat. Oh, you are welcome, Cynthia. I'm glad that made sense about the Greek. Yeah. And Christina, yes, you are going to absolutely love Not Church. Not Church is a place that is just dear to my heart, because so let me tell you, this is this religious community that's full of people of all different religious streams. But what happens, these people believe very different things, right? A Celtic mystic versus an agnostic, whatever. They will post in there about their religious experience or their belief or something that they're trying to figure out. And somebody who completely disagrees with them, has a completely different view of God and spirituality and the world, the universe, whatever, doesn't challenge them, doesn't tell them why they are wrong. The response that I see over and over again is like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard it put that way. What does that mean to you? Like, you said this phrase, which really resonated to me. What does that mean in your religious beliefs? It's this like respectful learning from each other dialogue that I just don't see other places. And I mean, if that's your thing, it's called Not Church. You can find the link in my profile. $3 a month. And because tithing isn't in the Bible, we're not going to ask you to give a percentage of your income. Just $3 a month. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, just stop paying. But I really think you'll love it. Links in the profile. All right. Some more questions. What do I know about early church history and papal lineage? I know some things, Josh. If you have a specific question about that, I'll tell you if I know anything about that. Josh, what do you think of televangelists like Perry Stone, Benny Hinn, Jensen Franklin? Listen, I grew up evangelical world. I went to charismatic churches on the side. I sort of like my primary church was a mainline church that was evangelical, and then I just sort of dabbled in charismatic churches on days that I wasn't at my church. I have books by Benny Hinn on the bookshelf in my basement. It was really important to me. I've now seen so many exposés on all of those televangelists and the way that they are just greedy and manipulative and just really horrible human beings behind the curtain, that I just I don't have any need for them. And I would just say, like, there's a lot of really interesting things that people say and write. And before you spend all your time on them, go read a book by Rob Bell or Brian McLaren, a book by Nadia Bolz-Weber. One of those. Do those instead. Then, if you need to find Benny Hinn later, go ahead and find him. Okay, let's see. Yeah, after years of therapy and freedom from religious trauma, sounds perfect. Yeah, Christina, it is. And we actually, you can go on YouTube, look at a recent live. I did an interview with a religious trauma therapist, which was absolutely fascinating. You might like that as well. Also, thanks for being a gifter. That's really wonderful. And I'm like, there's sometimes that I feel like I'm 1,000 years old. Like when people give roses and hearts and all the things, I really appreciate them. And I'm not 100% sure what it means. I've gotta talk to the Gen Z friend that I have and ask them about that, the other creator. Okay, I live in Georgia. Saying the King James Version is inaccurate is a death wish here. Still true though. You are not wrong. I have lived in that part of the country, and when I have said these kinds of things, I have gotten lots of pushback. Also, when I wrote an article that said in 1,000 different ways God loves you, like it says God loves you whether or not you have a big bank account or an empty bank account. I wrote that article in a local newspaper in the Deep South. I have never gotten so much hate. The comments on it were incredibly hateful. I got hate mail for weeks sent to me for telling people God loves them. So Justin, hang in there. Be one of the good ones in the Deep South. Yeah. You said, Melissa, they raised you in the church and you feel like being MAGA is so hypocritical. I don't understand how anyone can reconcile the values of the MAGA movement with anything in the Bible, anything Jesus said. It makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm not a person that's going to be able to help anyone understand that because it baffles me. Actually, it doesn't baffle me. It angers me. Yeah. Have I ever listened to The Holy Post by Phil Vischer and Sky Jethani? I know who Phil Vischer is. I don't know who Sky Jethani is. Phil Vischer is the guy who did Veggie Tales, Dance of the Cucumber, epic song. I haven't listened to that. I do need to look at that. That sounds really cool. If you've got questions, you can post them in the chat either here or on YouTube. And I'm looking at YouTube. Makinota, you said you're a man of God. Yes. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Am I a pastor? Yeah, I'm a pastor. But go ahead. If you've got a more direct question, I'd love to answer that for you. And Ada, hi, how are you doing? If you've got a question, go ahead and put the question in the chat, either on TikTok or on YouTube, and I'm answering as many as them as I can. Erica, you say, I'm fascinated, but I'm new here. What is it exactly that you're skeptical of? That's a valid question. And I really have probably a frustrating answer for you, and it's everything. I am skeptical as a personality type. I never treat anything as a completely settled fact. The more data there is around something, the harder it is to say that I'm gonna not believe that it's real, right? Like gravity. It's gonna take an enormous amount of data to tell me that gravity doesn't exist. But yeah, I'm always open. Thanks for the heart, Josh. I'm always open to new data, and I base my beliefs on the world and hopefully how I live my life on data and on what people who are experts in whatever field it is um, explain is the implications of that data. So yeah, Erica, I hope that is helpful to you. If you've got a question, just go ahead and put that in the chat. And both either on TikTok or on YouTube. And I'm answering as many of those as I can. Josh, have I read Dan McClellan's new book? I have read a little bit of it, not all of it. I got a signed copy. Dan is an amazing scholar and a friend. And I don't know if you saw it. We did a little piece of content together a while back. But yeah, it's a great book. I'd encourage everybody to get it. He's a brilliant, brilliant scholar. Brittany, what are your thoughts on Christians who dismiss or refute the no kings with God is our king? I mean, okay. God being our king, that is a metaphor in the Bible used in a monarchy. And so to say that God is our king when you are in a monarchy is to say that you want God to lead you in the same way that a king leads a monarchy. It is not saying that God is literally your political ruler, right? It's talking about the nature of your relationship with God. It's a metaphor, and that's an important the lack of treating metaphor as metaphor when reading the Bible. Like, we take the Bible seriously, not literally. I think that's what I'd say. Also, I would have lots of things to say. Yeah. Retro Andy, love your work. Are you still a Methodist pastor as well as your social media work? Yes, I am a Methodist pastor, and my job as a Methodist pastor is what you are seeing me do right now, as well as our podcast. We have a community called Not Church. It's on Discord. It's amazing. It's full of people who identify as all different streams of religion and non-religion. And it's respectful and wonderful. People are there for each other. One of our members just got released from the hospital and posted about that. We've been journeying with them through a long stay in the hospital, and we were all celebrating today about their release from the hospital. It's like a church, except nobody's judging you and telling you you're going to hell because you've got tarot cards or something. So yeah, there's a link in my profile, $3 a month, because tithing is not a thing that exists in the Bible. And so we're not going to ask anybody to give a percentage of income. It's $3. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work, just stop paying. But thanks for the question. Do I post sermons, videos from events you've spoken at anywhere? You know, I don't, but once a week in general on Sundays, if you go to the Unbelief podcast, it's something kind of like a sermon. It's like 30 minutes to an hour of teaching on an ancient spiritual text, generally about the Bible. Um, and yeah, just go wherever you do podcasts, look for Unbelief. And you'll actually have to go back 2 episodes, not the episode that came out today or the one that came out last Wednesday, but the episode before that is one of those. We're looking at parables, different of the short stories from Jesus. Yeah, it's good to find you. It's good to have you here, Taki. Jessen. Oh, Jessen, hey, how are you? It's so good to see you. Thanks for saying hi. And thanks for the roses, Tiki. I really appreciate those. Okay, so I've got another question. Um, uh, let's see, or comment. Let's see. It's on YouTube. It says, "God," and God is in quotes, "is a lie because God isn't equal to the truth. The true God is the truth, and therefore should be called as the truth, since this is the most honest." Do I agree? Mm, no, I hear what you're saying. Um, I and what I think I hear you saying, sort of at the base level, is that the word God is referring to something else. It and the referent of God is what you're saying should be what we say. And what you're saying is that the word God, the referent that it is pointing towards um, is the truth. I don't know that the truth is any more clear a term than God. I don't think that God is a lie. It's an English word. It's something that can be used pretty broadly to mean God, a deity in lots of religions. So I don't think I'd agree with that, but I appreciate the perspective. And like, just because I don't agree, doesn't mean you're not right. Uh, uh, but I've actually never thought about that, so I appreciate the opportunity. Like good questions like that um, are kind of like gifts that you get to unwrap as you consider them and turn them around in your head. And I can tell you that a really great question like this is one that I maybe a week later will be like, actually, no, I do agree with that because it'll stick in my head. He said, "I'm a trans woman. When I came out on Mother's Day, I saw the spiritual world was able to control my body for the first time in my life. Um, I saw the spiritual world and was able to control my body for the first time in my life. The truth told me my name and to search for the truth." Hey, listen, first, there you go. Uh, Coming out as a trans woman is hard. I have many friends who are trans women, and um, I just want to recognize that, validate that, say I know that's hard. I've walked next to people who were in the middle of that. Um, and I also know that being able to live fully or more fully who you are is a wonderful thing. I've actually heard this kind of a story about finding uh, your your name as a trans person. That there are moments where it's like one of my friends said the universe just spoke their name to them. I hear you saying something really similar. I love that you had that experience. And Ada, I think that's great. I'm also so grateful that you have gotten to a place where you're able to control your body for the first time in your life. That kind of biological and physical agency is so important. And anyway, I am thankful you said that. Um, and I don't know, I've got lots of trans friends, and yeah. Anyway, and get you. Yeah. Say before it was like a sci-fi horror movie. Yeah, a lie was controlling your body. I listen. That is a beautiful way, a horrible way, but I think a perfect way of describing uh, the experience that my trans friends describe prior to coming out and fully sort of, as you say, taking control of your own body. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for all of that, Ada. I'm going to look over here at TikTok and see um, what new questions we have here. How do you explain or define the divine counsel? Oh, and Jenny says, I love and admire your videos. Thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate it. Okay. So, uh, the divine counsel is this idea, and it's not just in the Old Testament. It's a common thing in the culture at the time. The idea that there was like in Babylonian, Canaanite religions, the idea is that the gods, there's multiple gods, there's sort of a hierarchy, a bureaucracy, there's like a divine council, like a church council, like a whatever, and they come together, and there's a higher one, there's a hierarchy that's running the things, and that you see that reflected in the Old Testament, um, where where you've got like in Job, you actually see the divine counsel really depicted. You It's even like I think it's directly referenced in the book of Psalms. If you just Google divine counsel Psalms, you'll find that one. Yeah, but this is a bigger idea that was sort of around in that culture, religions at the time, and yeah, I hope that helps. And so we actually see the same thing in the Old Testament. The earlier it goes, the more prevalent this idea is. You keep going until now, until it gets a little bit less in favor. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Josh. I can't wait to see you in the Patreon in Not Church. You're gonna love it. I can tell you that. Is it like a pantheon? Yeah, I would say yes, but not exactly like a pantheon because it's more dynamic, it's more collaborative, I feel like, than that. But yes, there's like a head god like Zeus or whatever. All right. Hey, this has been wonderful. I've had an absolutely fabulous time answering questions, doing Q&A together. We're going to do it again. Don't worry. But thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.